Hey there, how are you doing today? Rusty Nelson here, talking watercolor. How is your watercolor journey going? Are you making progress? Are you getting better? Is the practice paying off yet? I'm just kind of curious. I haven't had a lot of comments on any of my vlog posts lately, so I'm just wondering if the tutorials are doing what you're hoping they're doing. I'm covering the subject matter that you're wanting to be covered. For any of you new viewers just tuning in, if this is the first time you're watching the channel, that's what I do. I'm a university professor and I'm posting watercolor tutorials out to YouTube to help anybody who's interested in learning how to paint with watercolor, gain those skills, that knowledge base, and start developing some pretty cool creative skills. So I hope that's that's my intent for my channel, and I hope that's what I'm actually trying to get accomplished with my tutorials. I've been on YouTube for about 7 months, and I'm still learning a lot of skill sets, and one of them is learning how to speak to a camera, which is the whole point and purpose of this vlog post and podcast, is just for me to get my training reps in and become more comfortable and a better on-screen personality. So I'm doing some very uncomfortable things, some very unnatural things. Even though I'm a college professor, I'm in front of people talking about this all the time. There is definitely something very foreign and intimidating about being on screen, being recorded, and talking in a manner where you're actually trying to communicate something in an entertaining and informative manner. So the students up at the university, they cut me a lot of slack, and we have a lot of good times together, but it's definitely a different dynamic than being on screen and talking to a camera. I'm actually filming this on my iPad, and I'm looking at the little camera off to the side. I have a little green little dot next to the camera with a happy face on it, so I can envision who I'm talking to right there. So it's a nice little green smiley face. Man, so many new things to learn. So anyway, back to watercolor. How is that journey going? So yeah, definitely that's the question. You're probably running into a lot of different issues, various things you realize that you're needing to get better at, and that's a good thing. You're identifying all the things. You now know what you didn't know. You know now what you got to get better at. So it's not such a big mystery, and it's not a big mystery learning how to do watercolor. It's steps and stages and processes and skills that you have to develop and start layering upon each other to get to that point where it just, I've said this before, when the clouds part and the angels sing, you know you're on the right path. And it'll happen intermittently. Every now and then you're going to have you'll hit that sweet spot, that perfect subject matter. You were in a good zone that day. You were able to just crank something out and it looked great. You try it 10 minutes, 20 minutes later, or the next day, it'll go to hell. So that's the ultimate goal, and the thing that you're looking for is that ability to repeat the process, that consistency and the ability to repeat and develop those skills and do it again consistently. So without any further repetition on that subject matter, I'm looking at my notes here. So yeah, don't throw the stuff in the trash yet. Well, you might throw your bad versions in the trash. You don't need to keep those, and you might keep a few of them just to remind yourself as to from what point you have come from, and give yourself a gauge of how much better you have become through the sheer act of practice. And again, if there is a big secret to watercolor and or creating art in any medium, it's just simply do the work. Practice, practice, practice. Don't worry about it being artwork. You're really developing the vocabulary, the aesthetics that's going to be necessary for that day down the line when you are actually creating artwork for people to enjoy and see. So yeah, don't throw. I know it's frustrating, trust me, and I see the students up at the school all the time. They get pretty frustrated when they can't get those simple things. And I'll look at their sketch pads or their blocks, their watercolor paper, and see the things that they're practicing on. And whatever it is, they might have a little dinky section of something that they painted that is everything's functioning in that little 1-inch square where I can point to it and say, that's the good part right there. This other stuff, you maybe have overworked it. Maybe you don't have enough saturation. You don't have this, you don't have that. But this section right here, you nailed it. That's what you need to work on, is expanding it out. And then I do the demos in class for the students as well. And I work in class with the students on my own things to show them processes and techniques, and I encourage them to, if they're having a little if they're having a bad day for the day that they're in class, I invite them to just set it aside, come up and watch and see what I'm doing. And it oftentimes gives them a little fresh perspective and a little time off of whatever it was they were working on to come see what I'm doing. And trust me, I understand. I remember doing this too, and watching other tutorials on YouTube, or even people in the past I worked with, watching them work. They make it look easy. They make it look effortless, but it's not. They have spent the time to develop that skill set, that hand, and the confidence that they can make it look easy. And they learn to trust the process. They learn to trust the medium, and they have just developed that restraint, that self-control, and knowledge base to know when not to go in and fuss with it anymore. And that's one of the key things too. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, I probably have overworked quite a few of my tutorials just because I'm sitting there fussing around with it. And I talked about this in the last vlog post. It was, it's a different thing just to sit down and do a watercolor without any other pressure. Just that's all you're focusing on, is to get a good end result with that piece of paper right in front of you. But then you throw a freaking camera on it and you're recording it as a tutorial for somebody else to consume the process. Boy, that adds a whole new layer of complexity to it. It's like rubbing your tummy and patting your head, or walking and chewing bubble gum. It becomes a whole new skill set, and that's the thing, and that's the point, and that's the the developmental stage that I'm at right now, trying to be able to get a decent looking product, that watercolor, while I'm filming something that will be a decent and a good product for you to look at and watch and to hopefully learn something from. So it's definitely, I know the feeling, and I even just getting this vlog post started. I always have trouble with like the first minute and a half of these talking head videos, in just getting going and getting over that initial idea of, I just turned on a record, right? I just hit the record button and now I'm talking. So trying to keep a coherent thought in my head, looking down at my notes. I don't like, and I knew this from high school, even doing my high school and college speech courses. I hate formal speeches where you write it out, have a script, and memorize it and deliver it. I've always hated that. And I loved, I took forensics. That's what we called it back then, forensics, where we had an improv class, and we loved improv and did a lot of that. And we did really pretty well with it. Took it to state, had a lot of fun at state doing improv. So I've always known, I always liked doing it off the top of my head. And I realized even back then you can practice it. And then that's what I do in class as well, is just simply, I'm pulling this out. I'm pulling this out on the fly. I know my subject, right? It's just I got to get that out in some sort of an organized, mental organized thought process. So I do write out my little bullet points here. Not that I have this diatribe going on my notes, but it's definitely led me into that discussion. So, but let me rein this back. Don't give up. That's the main thing that I'm trying to get through in this blog post today, is your journey is just getting started. The more you work at it, the longer you spend at it. I don't know. People have different ways of working too. Maybe it's multiple short duration sessions you sit down and do to build your skills. Maybe you like working in bigger blocks and then take a longer break, right? So maybe it's an hour or two and then you break until the next day. Maybe you just like the 15-minute things, come back to it in a half hour or whatever. Everybody has a different process and system that they're going to develop that they understand that is successful for them. And or maybe you like, do you want to do studio work? Do you want to work from photographic reference, or do you want to go out, do sketches, bring them back in, and then do studio work? Do you want to go out and do plein air? There's so many options for you to develop these skills. And I definitely run the students up at the university through a whole series of things too. We do a lot of stuff in class. A lot of times my watercolor class begins in January. So there's not a lot of good time outside that we can spend until, we hit April or late March, early April. But even then it's touch and go before we can get outside and really start doing some plein air things. But the students really do like that as well, because they can get out, get a little fresh air, and see if they can apply those skills they've been working on up until that point. So, try different things, figure out what works best for you as you are learning your watercolor skills. I do have a bunch. I think I mentioned in the last blog post that I have just hit my mic. I have a pretty long landscape tutorial with aspen trunks in it, dropping or just dropped as you're watching this. So last week, I'm also going to be dropping some tutorials on doing people, adding people into it. And the first one I'm starting out with is a sketch moving into the watercolor work of a pretty girl, right, in profile. And I'm doing that because pretty people, young people, children, oh man, they're a pain in the butt. They're hard because you got to get all your angles, you got to get all your proportions just right for them to look good. So that is, I'm jumping into the deep end of the pool, making it kind of a hard thing to do. But I'll walk you through the initial steps. I mentioned in the last blog post that I work with the Loomis method, have developed and worked with that and taught that in class for the last 20 years. That works best for me, and if I refined it over the years, I even talked about that. The last figure drawing class I took as a student, it was like some 40 years ago. And then I had like a long break, 15, 16-year break from being a student doing figure drawing, going in and working professionally in advertising for 15, 16 years, and then moving into higher education and being assigned a drawing course and then a figure drawing course. So really kind of having to go back to what I remember as a student, and then remembering then what I didn't like about being a student and what was done there, and developing my own thing that I bring to my students in my class. So, and one of the best things I found on figure drawing to introduce in my figure drawing class was the Loomis method, and learning how to draw a proportional mannequin, and then using that mannequin, that skeletal structure, to then draw the pose and capture the essence of the pose, and developing a hand with charcoal media, graphite, pen and ink, markers, and then also watercolor. So we run our way through all of those media and mediums in my drawing course, and that's hopefully what I'll be doing on my tutorials that I'll be posting here soon too, that involve people, how to draw people, how to create a process and a structure that you can reliably employ to get to that end result. So people are touchy. I mean, exactly, you'll see exactly when you have it incorrect, because it won't look right. And people are used to looking at other people. So if you don't have your proportions right, you don't have your foreshortening right, it's going to show up. And that's why people can be such a challenge, is because we are, as a viewer, somebody looking at that as an artist or as a viewer of the artwork, we can see it immediately where the problem is, or we can see it's a problem, but we may not understand why it's a problem. And that's what your skill sets and what you'll be developing as an artist, a person that's able to draw people. And then that skill set, when you're really focused on doing people, you can then employ putting those figures into your watercolors in a smaller scale, in really deft strokes, proportional strokes into your watercolor, and everything reads perfectly. So the viewer's eye will do a lot of work. So anyway, that's what I was hoping to accomplish today in the vlog post. This is my first week back to class, and we're hard at it and neck deep in it. I probably have had 2 courses. The first day sessions already under my belt, and we're neck deep in it already. So I get rolling right away. I get the students working on assignments right from the start, and that's where I'm at. I hope you're making good progress with your skill sets. Please drop me some comments, anything you're having issues with, something I can talk about other than just me coming in here to babble for 15 minutes. But I am doing this just for practice. I think I'm getting a little better. Once I get going, everything seems to work pretty well. But that first minute, 2 minutes, it's just murder for me. So, all right. Hey, if you got any value out of this crazy talk, let me know. Give me a like, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next vlog post.